Are you absolutely sick of carrying around multiple guitar cases, multiple guitar stands when you play a show? Because I know I am. But I think I may have finally got my hands on a really good solution. Let's get into it. So after doing a lot of research and speaking to other bands that I meet on the road about these cases, finally, I managed to take the plunge. Now these Enki cases are a big investment. There's no getting around that. But when you compare them to, say, a flight case guitar vault or the Scott Dixons or the other popular brands that do this similar thing, it's not actually comparatively that much. But for a thing, for a case, yes, it is very expensive. And I will be paying it off probably until well into my retirement. But really worth it. Remember that the guitars that you're taking in there are worth not just financial value, but in many cases, sentimental value as well. So protecting them when you're flying, even just going around in vans and buses, protecting those guitars is absolutely crucial. And obviously the bonus is that with these kind of ones and the other similar vaults that I mentioned, you can whack the lid off and they function as a guitar boat as well, which is what I was looking for my personal use. Alternatively, you need to travel with 2 separate cases and maybe even a guitar boat separate as well that you unfold, or a rack or something else, but that's then 3 separate pieces that you've got to not only carry but keep track of. Yeah, that could get very difficult very quickly. And it has, because I've been doing it for years. So as a guitarist, I've toured all over the UK and all over Europe. And up until owning this case, what I've done is, which is not the best thing to do, is when I'm traveling far or having to fly, I'd only take 1 guitar and kind of chance it on a backup. But there's only so many times you can do that before something will inevitably go wrong. So ideally, especially if it's a really big important tour, you've got to have a spare guitar. Even if you're sharing one between both guitarists in a band or what have you, you must really have a spare guitar. So that then obviously adds the need for a second case, guitar racks on stage, that kind of thing. The pros so far for me, it's a very elegant case. Now I've toured as a tech loads and I've worked for bands that used, say, the Scott Dixons, and after a while those do get quite beaten up, and once they do, because they're metal, they start to get dented and contorted, and then they're very hard to close and things like that. So I just think these being a really tough ABS plastic, for me personally, I think these would probably be harder wearing, maybe not visually, but I think overall harder wearing. And you've got to hope a little bit lighter than those metal cases, or even the plywood flight case style guitar boats as well, because those things must weigh an absolute ton. Now that's not to say that this thing is light with 2 guitars in, it's heavy. But the idea of it being on wheels means that potentially for the majority of the transportation that you're doing, you could be wheeling it and not having to carry it, because it is a bit of a lump. So speaking of transportation, it's got a really solid carrying handle there, which is obviously once it's in more of a horizontal position, that's how you carry it. It doesn't feel to me like it would ever break. It's screwed on nice and solid. The lid, you've probably seen, but the lid actually flips down and it reveals the guitars inside. So in terms of protection, the guitars are really well protected, so much so that it is a little bit awkward getting them in and out, because they are very snug in there. Now that's a good thing, because movement is what you don't want. You can have all the padding and stuff in the world, but if those guitars can still move around, that's when you get problems, especially if you're checking these things into a plain hold. So yeah, very snug fit. Now what you can do with this lid also is there's a little bit of storage in there. It comes with a spare kind of neck foam, which is very handy, because I know that will take some punishment with guitars going inside and out. It's going to get punished, but they give you a spare, which is good. You can also use that to pad out the inside of the lid should you wish. I've just got some cables stored in here, and you get a handy little Enki case as well, which might be good for wireless packs, in-ears, whatever. I've seen people stuff a quad cortex behind their wireless up there and have their whole rig inside this Enki, and even maybe some of their clothes as well, because you're already checking this thing anyway. So if it's not over the weight limit, you might as well fill it up with some more clothes. Not only will that take some strain off your suitcase, but also a little bit more protection inside. Inside the lid is really thick foam, so it's well padded. Obviously, you shouldn't get anything going in this lid other than those accessories, but it's padded just in case. So on the top is a nice strong latch. I think this is the second revision, so it's changed a little bit from a lot of the reviews that I saw online anyway. So it clips shut like that. The wheels are like skate wheels. They're really good quality. They roll well, which is good. You know, it's tall and narrow, so I think if you had the base one, it might be quite awkward when you're trying to, you know, roll it along. Probably not so much with this one, but you still have to be a little bit careful because it's kind of gonna twist if you're not careful anyway. So this lid can actually slide off on the hinge. Let's see how easy this works. So the lid comes off like that, and you can pop that down to the side or behind it. And then as you can see, the case then becomes quite a handy guitar boat for on stage. You can see around the rim of the lid, there is actually an O-ring. So it's actually weather sealed as well, which is another plus. For that kind of thing, you'd need alternatively like one of those big Pelican cases that hold 2 guitars or 1 guitar, whatever. And those things are comparatively very expensive. So when you kind of weigh these things up, the Enki becomes quite good value. Although obviously, initially it's a big investment. So as I said, the guitars are very, very snug. There's no give in them whatsoever. The bodies kind of sit into this fabric base unit that you can adjust. You can adjust the middle partition, and you can also buy replacements. Should that get beaten up, you can actually buy that as a spare, which is a good feature because on some of the other brands you can't do that, or at least not easily. So that's a bit of a plus there. So if this ever does suffer, you can actually change it. There is some reflective material just on the middle partition. So if you're on a dark stage, hopefully that will shine under the stage lighting so you can just see where that middle partition is. Is this case perfect? Of course not. No product is absolutely 100% perfect. So here are my thoughts on what the potential negatives could be. Firstly, this hinge I can see instantly is going to be a weak point. Now, if I'm taking this on and off at shows, or if someone's doing it for me and then maybe they're being a bit too gung-ho trying to get it back on, I reckon these pins could bend quite easily. I mean, I can do it with my thumb. I can bend the pins quite easily. So you'd have to be really, really careful when using it in boat mode. I think if you were, you wouldn't have any problems, but that to me looks like a weak point. I haven't studied the hinge on some of the rivals to this case, so I don't know how it fares in comparison, but to me that's definitely a weak point. But that's not to say it is going to break. I just think if anything on this case is going to go, it's going to be that hinge, particularly in my use where I'm going to be using it as a boat as well. Another negative is, it's a kind of a negative from a positive. The positive is that it's so snug. The negative is that it's so snug, because what you find is when you're taking the guitars in and out, there is the plastic ledge there, and if you're not careful, you do kind of knock the guitar against that. Eventually that could potentially mark your finish on your guitar if you're not careful. So it just means you've got to take a little bit of care. There is a strip of rubber on the inside, but in my opinion it's not quite enough to give you full protection of putting guitars in and out. I can see why they haven't, but ideally you'd want a little return on that seal so actually the rubber comes up and over just ever so slightly, so that the top of that plastic piece there is protected as well. I can see why they haven't, because then obviously the lid wouldn't seal, but they've done what they can as far as I can tell. I may look at modifying this to make it a little bit softer if I can. But you'll see when you put the guitar in, you've just got to be super careful, which as long as you've got time to be careful is absolutely fine and you won't have any issues. But as we all know, playing shows, sometimes it's so frantic, you don't get a second to spare. Maybe if your string goes midway through a set, you've got to put this guitar back and quickly grab the other one to start playing again mid-song. You've got to be really, really careful on here, I can see. The other potential negative for me, and this one I toyed with for so long, and that's sadly looking at the theft aspect. whereby if my guitars are in separate cases, in my mind, maybe there's less of a chance that both would get stolen in the event of a robbery. But obviously with this thing, if this gets taken, 2 guitars gone. So that really worries me, as it probably would anyone else. But, you know, a lot of bands take guitars in combined cases, even if it's those dual mono cases, which are really good as well. So even if it's a dual gig bag, you could still have that issue. I'm gonna fit an Apple AirTag, of course, like everyone, just to make sure I can try and trace it if that happens. That is my personal worry. That's not a problem with the product, that's just a problem with the application, say. Maybe it would be okay, I don't know, but it just obviously increases the likelihood of both guitars being stolen rather than one. Hopefully neither ever gets stolen, but you just never know. In times that we're in now, things happen. But ultimately, the guitars are in there, very nice and snug. They're very well protected. These are 2 different shape and different size guitars, but they fit in there very well. This is a Les Paul Jr. kind of body, and this is a Telecaster body. They fit in there very well. The slanted headstock doesn't interfere with the one behind it. As I say, there is some adjustment if need be as well. So if we go to pop the lid back on, I might not be able to get this on camera, but it's quite awkward. It's really quite awkward to get back on. And that's it, back on. Now, this is a lit studio, and that was quite tricky. So, dark stage, dark festival backstage, trailer, whatever you've got to do it in, it could be quite tricky. So, you're going to have to be careful. On the top, also, we have points for TSA padlocks, whatever you want to do on that front, so that they can open it and check it if they need. But someone at baggage claim can't just willy-nilly open it and take a guitar out. But if TSA need to get in or what have you, they can with if you have an approved lock. Another plus for me is that the case, when it's closed, is more of a uniform case shape. Now, what I've seen with a lot of the other similar brands, and this is going to sound really strange, what I've seen is a lot of them go to almost a coffin shape. And it's like, when I'm not on tour, this is going to be sat in my studio, my dining room, whatever. I don't particularly want a coffin sat in the corner of the room. I'm not playing in Cradle of Filth. And if I was, maybe I could afford many Enkis. But for me, I wanted one that looked more like a case once it was closed. And that's where these Enkis come in good as well. And being that they are that shape, it gives you all that extra storage space in the lid as well, which is key. The ones that cut into a coffin shape, obviously you're losing a lot of storage space in that lid. If you want to be super fancy, you could take this plate off and put your own band decals and everything on there. I see most people put a strip across there. I'm going to be getting some decals made up so that if all contact details are on there, should this ever go missing. So overall, really, really happy. It's a big, big investment, but so are the guitars that you're putting in there that you want to protect. So sometimes the price of things is worth it. And as I say, comparatively, compared to other similar cases, the price isn't too bad. So super excited to finally be an Enki Ace owner. And I'll be taking this out on the road in 2026 and beyond, when I play as a guitarist in various bands. And despite the cost, I can rest safe in the knowledge that my guitars will be okay when I get to the other end of wherever I'm going, which is really important. So that's my initial review of the Enki double guitar case. Let me know down in the comments if you use a different case or you enjoy this case. I'd love to hear from you. Once I've used it for a time, I will come back to you and we'll do a follow-up as well. Please do consider subscribing because it really, really helps out the channel. And you'll get notifications, if you so wish, when I make a new video. There's lots of tech and player content coming up for this year, and I'd love for you to come along with me for the ride. Thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next video.